A fierce warrior, clad in leather and mail, her eyes blazing with defiance. She stands on the battlefield, shield in one hand, axe in the other, and equal to any man. This is the image of the Shieldmaiden, a cultural icon brought to life in shows like Vikings. She's the ultimate symbol of Norse strength and female empowerment. We see characters like lagertha leading armies, and we can't help but be captivated. But how much of this incredible picture is history, and how much is modern myth? Today, we're sharpening our axes of inquiry and breaking the shield wall of misconception. It's time to debunk the most common myths about the legendary Shieldmaidens. Let's start with the biggest myth of all, that Shieldmaidens were a common, recognized class of warrior, fighting in organized armies right alongside the men. Popular culture shows us legions of them, suggesting that a Viking shield wall was a 50-50 split of men and women. The sagas, the epic stories of the Norse, do mention women warriors. We hear tales of figures like Hervor or the Valkyrie Brynhildr. But in these texts, they are almost always presented as extraordinary, even supernatural. They are legendary figures who break the norms of their society. The stories emphasize their rarity, treating them as remarkable exceptions, not as a standard part of a Viking army. There's no historical evidence for entire regiments of female fighters. This brings us to the most crucial piece of evidence we have, and our second major myth. That the famous Birka warrior grave proves that Shieldmaidens were common military leaders. In the 1870s, archaeologists in Birka, Sweden, unearthed a spectacular 10th-century grave. Inside was a skeleton buried with the full equipment of a high-ranking warrior: a sword, an axe, spears, arrows, and 2 shields. The grave even included a set of gaming pieces, suggesting a strategist, a leader who planned battles. For over 100 years, because of the weapons and status, this individual was assumed to be a man. A textbook example of a powerful Viking chieftain. But then, in 2017, everything changed. A team of scientists conducted a DNA analysis on the bones. The results were stunning. The skeleton was biologically female. The news went viral. Here, it seemed, was definitive proof of a female Viking commander. And while this discovery is absolutely groundbreaking, it's often misinterpreted. The Birka warrior proves that a woman could achieve a high-status military role. It proves at least one did. But one grave, no matter how incredible, does not make an army. It's what historians call an exception, not the rule. Instead of proving that Shieldmaidens were common, the Birka grave highlights just how unique and remarkable such a person would have been. The debate still rages in academic circles, but one thing is clear. This single grave can't support the idea of widespread, organized female warriors. Now for a myth that's more about aesthetics than archaeology: the look. The image of a Shieldmaiden is almost always a warrior in a leather corset or, sometimes, a straight-up leather bikini. It's a fantasy look that's become standard. Let's be blunt, this is pure fiction. Viking-era armor was all about one thing: survival. A leather corset offers zero protection and actively restricts movement and breathing. Fighting in one would be a terrible, and likely very short, experience. Real Viking-era protection was practical. Warriors wore thick, padded wool or leather garments called gambesons to absorb impact. If they could afford it, they wore chainmail over that. It was heavy, functional, and definitely not form-fitting. Their helmets were simple conical caps, often with a noseguard. There were no horns, and there was certainly no special, gendered armor. Protection was unisex. If a woman went into battle, she would have worn the exact same practical, life-saving gear as a man. So, let's move on to myth number 4. That the term, Shieldmaiden, applied to any woman who picked up a weapon. The idea is that Viking society was a free-for-all where women regularly chose the warrior's path. The reality is far more nuanced. Viking society was incredibly tough. With many men away for long periods on raids or trade journeys, women were left in charge of the homestead. They held the keys, managed the farm, controlled the family's finances, and were responsible for its defense. A Viking woman would have absolutely known how to use an axe. Not for raiding, but to chop wood, butcher animals, and if necessary, defend her home and children from attack. This was a matter of sheer practicality and survival. This self-defense is very different from being a professional warrior who actively seeks out battle. Norse law codes actually show us that society had very distinct gender roles. While women had significant rights, they could own property, inherit land, and initiate divorce. Their primary domain was the farm and the family. A woman defending her home was a capable, respected member of society. A woman who completely abandoned that role to live the life of a raider would have been a massive outlier, a figure of legend and story, which is exactly how the sagas portray them. So, where does this leave us? Have we completely shattered the image of the Shieldmaiden, leaving nothing but dust and myth? Not exactly. The pop culture version, the armies of women in leather corsets, is certainly a fantasy. The historical and archaeological records simply don't support it. There was no formal class of warrior women that formed a regular part of Viking armies. But the truth is perhaps more compelling. We have the sagas, which tell us the Norse imagined powerful female warriors, even if they were rare and legendary. They were fascinated by the idea of women who broke the mold. And we have the incredible reality of the Birka grave, tangible proof that at least one woman was laid to rest as a high-ranking military leader, a strategist, and a warrior. An exception, yes, but a powerful one. Most importantly, we have the reality of the everyday Viking woman, resilient, capable, and entrusted with the defense of her home. She wasn't a Shieldmaiden in the fantasy sense, but she was a pillar of Norse society, ready to wield an axe when danger came to her door. The truth about Shieldmaidens isn't a simple yes or no. It's a fascinating gray area where legend, archaeology, and the harsh realities of life in the Viking Age all collide. The myth is epic, but the reality is just as strong.